is February 16th, 2026, and today's session is about using Schoolnet in the math and science classroom specifically. So while we're not going to be going over a lot of the basic things like building an assessment or like reporting, we are going to be talking specifically about some strategies or some tips and tricks, as you will, specifically for math and science teachers. So if you are curious about some of those other things, such as reporting or building an assessment, I do encourage you to check out some of our previous sessions. They are all listed on your Schoolnet homepage, all of our recordings and then upcoming sessions as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Rebecca Stokes. I am the product manager for Schoolnet for NCDPI. My email address is right here on slide 2. You want to make sure that you have that. I'm here for any of your Schoolnet questions at any point. So that's why I'm here, is to support you. So want to make sure that you have that. I'm going to put that back in the chat again. Catherine Simone is our implementation manager with Pearson. She is a wonderful resource. She could not be here today, or either she's going to be coming in late. I'm not sure which one just yet, but her email address is located here as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your Monday to join me for this session. Our topics today, we're going to explore some specific filter options for math and science. We're going to talk about adding items to a test. If you want to duplicate test items, and by duplicating it, it gives you your own copy for you to be able to edit. We're going to talk about some test settings, some special features just for math and science, the Desmos calculator, or specifically the North Carolina Desmos calculator. And if we have any K2 teachers on the call, talk about some K2 specific features and then just some science resources. So I'm going to try my hardest to get through all of this in the next 55 minutes. So again, I am going to try and pause for questions that might be in the chat, but I do ask for grace while I'm flying solo with this. I'm going to try to remember to pause and do that, but just know that I will get to your questions. It just might not be as soon as you post it in the chat, but I will get to those, okay? All right, so first up, of course, accessing the platform. You access Schoolnet by going through NC Ed Cloud. I do encourage you to be in Schoolnet with me while I'm in the training site for you to be able to kind of follow along and see where I'm clicking. But of course, you'll be able to watch this recording back as well. I do have on slide 8 a training site login for you if you would like to kind of test some things out excuse me, in the training site before you're actually trying some of these features in your production site. Then of course you always have access to the training site with that as well. So first up is exploring some different filter options. So I am going to be going into the training site. Let me admit this person. There we go. Okay. Sorry. Every time I hear the little doorbell. Okay. So let me make sure that I am zoomed in for you to be able to see. There we go. Let me move the chat over. All right, so one thing that we wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of is the different filters that you can use when you are searching for items. So I'm going to come over to the assessments tab, and normally I would go to like build a test, but we're actually going to show you from the item perspective first today. So I'm going to go to find and items. Okay, so first up is the banks. So there are several banks that you have access to, but we wanted to point out 2 specifically. One is the Key Data Systems Bank. So we purchased this bank from Renaissance Learning, and the reason that we purchased this is because this is the only bank that has technology enhanced items. So if you are wanting your students to practice technology enhanced items on formative assessments throughout the year, you're going to want to make sure that you are either creating them yourself or you are pulling questions from this Key Data Systems item bank. They are aligned to North Carolina standards, but I do want to point out, especially for our science teachers on the call, that While they are aligned to our North Carolina standards, they might not be aligned to the boundary statement. So we know our science standards also include boundary statements. Since that is a resource and not an actual part of the North Carolina Standard Course of Study with that standard, the question will be aligned to the standard, but it might not go with the boundary statement. So I always encourage our teachers to build a manual test so that you are previewing those questions. So just for example, with fifth grade science with weather, let's say the boundary statement says that the students don't have to know the name of clouds. There might be a question that includes cloud names. So you, of course, just would not choose that question if you did not want the students to have a question about the cloud names. So just wanted to point that out for science specifically. All right, let me let this user in real quick. Okay, so that's the first filter is the key data systems, choosing your bank. And then we always encourage the NCDPI Classroom Bank. This is the one that we get from NCDPI. So it's written by the same TOPS program that is giving the questions for the end of grade test as well. They're, of course, not the questions that are on the end of grade test. They are the ones that they decided not to use. And we are extremely fortunate in North Carolina that we get those questions for formative use in the classroom. So those are the two banks that I would point out to use. So I'm going to click select banks. Let me let this user in. I apologize for posting this in the chat, but I know that the new people that come in don't have access to that. So I want to make sure put that out there. All right, so depending on your subject, so for this particular hour, it would be math or science. So you could choose, of course, whichever one. So I'll go with science since that's the first one that I see. Let me take off these other two. Okay, and then of course you would want to choose your grade level. Right, so that's why all of this is selected. You would not have to unselect all of this. So you don't have to worry about that. And I've got to let some more people in real quick. There we go. Okay. All right, so we've got our banks, we've got our subject, we've got our grade level, and then of course you want to make sure that you are selecting the standards because if not, you will be sorting through thousands of items. So we don't want to do that if we're trying to build a formative assessment or a common formative. We want to be able to drill down to those specific standards. So one thing that I want to point out here when you are selecting your standards is that the triangles to the left do drill down into the standard as small as it goes. So if there was like a part A, B, or C, then it would drop down as small as that standard goes. But if there is a plus sign beside the standard, so if I wanted to assess this ESS 5.1, if I wanted to have all of these standards, then I'm going to want to click this plus sign. For some reason, if you click just the text, it's not going to add the items over. So I'll show you what I mean. So if I click the text, I can see the standard, but there's no number here. That lets me know that no questions are going to be showing up. So I'm going to hit that trash can. But if I hit the plus sign, now I have questions that have numbers beside it, letting me know that I now am going to have items that are searching. Okay, so let's see. It looks like someone is hearing an echo. I don't know if that's me or if it's you guys. Anybody else hearing an echo? You can just put in the chat. Okay, perfect. All right, so Melinda, I am not sure. Others are saying that they are not hearing an echo. So I'm not sure if maybe you're in two different windows. I know that sometimes if you have the call up on two different windows, then it will have an echo. So you might want to check to make sure that you're not in this webinar on a separate window as well. And Jenny, so it just says, let me go back here. So it says life and physical science here, but that encompasses all of the science standards. So that's just the life and physical sciences, but all of the science standards are encompassed in that. Let me let some people in. Okay, there we go. Oh, perfect. I'm glad that that solved it. Okay. All right, so here is where we wanted to point out some of the additional standards, or not standards, but filters, because I now have 542 items to look through. But I can come right down here to this magnifying glass and hit all filters, and these are the ones that we wanted to point out specifically. So if you wanted some technology enhanced items, then you could just select those types that you wanted to include on the test, and that would filter your items down as well. You uncheck those. You also can scroll down and you can sort by the DOK level, the cognitive demand level, the Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so you can sort by those as well. If you are frequently using Schoolnet and you don't want questions that you have already used on an assessment, you can also, sometimes this gets overlooked, you can check this box right here. And as long as you are the author of the test, okay, so this won't work if you are using shared classroom assessments or school assessments. But if you are using My Classroom Assessments and you are the creator, then if you check this box, it will automatically remove any question that you have already used on a scheduled test for that current school year. Okay, so you don't have to worry about wondering like, oh, I think I already gave this one when I assessed this standard before. You, of course, don't have to check that box so that any that you have assessed already in the year will show. But if you would like to exclude those, then you can check that box. Okay. All right. Let me let this user in and let me go back to make sure that I am covering everything that I have put in this slide deck. I want to make sure, and everything that I'm showing you in the live site is going to be in the slide deck. Okay, perfect. I did. All right, so one other thing we wanted to point out from here, so once you've chosen all of your filters, when you have your list of items on the right-hand side, it's going to tell you what bank that question came from, but it's also going to point out whatever the question is tagged with. So the NCDPI classroom items are going to have the Bloom's domain and the cognitive demand. Okay, whereas key data systems is going to have the DOK level and I believe also the cognitive demand. So before you select an item, you're able to see on the right-hand side those different properties so that if you are wanting to choose questions that vary in those types of levels, then you can see it on the right-hand side before selecting. Okay, so I'm just going to select 2 of these and I'll see my item actions and I can click to add to a test. And I can either choose one that I've already created or I could go here to build a new assessment. Now we're not going to go through building the assessment since that is covered in a different session, but that is where you would be able to then create a test with these items or add them to a test you already have. All right. So before I go to the next section, I think I had already answered all the questions in there. Perfect. Okay. So adding items to the test. So I did want to point out, so I just showed you how you would actually add these items to a test, but I do want to point out something that you have access to that you might not realize, and that is the item bank counts. If you want to know how many total items you have to choose from, and especially with the key data systems, what specific type of items with the technology enhanced you have access to, you always have that available to you on your home screen. So let me see if I can get this to go away so I can show that to you. Calm down. There we go. See if I can make this larger. All right, so I'm going to go to the live site really quick because we don't have this on the training site. All right, so if I go like I am a teacher, And let me zoom in here as well. All right, so there's two resources specifically for technology enhanced items. So if I'm on my homepage and I'm going to see this Schoolnet splash page here, if I scroll down past the webinars, then you're going to see this document here that says NC item bank counts. So you'll be able to click here, and there's several tabs at the bottom. Okay, the ones that say updates, that's just letting you know every time we get new questions, because we put the date and the type of bank it is and how many items we got per subject and grade level. Okay, but if you just click on the tab that has the name of the bank, like the classroom bank here, that's going to give you the total number of items we have after those updates have been made. Okay, so you always have access to the most recent numbers of items that we have in those banks. Okay, and so you'll see for the DPI one, which is the one that I'm in, we only get multiple choice items. Every once in a while, we'll get an open response. You can see we have two. Okay, but it's 99.9% multiple choice. Whereas if I click on the KDS or the Key Data Systems Bank, that is where I'm able to see the different technology enhanced items that we have. And again, for grade levels and subject areas. Okay. Now, let me let someone in really quick. Now, if you are looking at the screen, you might be noticing that some of the names of the items are not familiar. Okay. Well, that is because the check-ins and the EOG and EOC are created by a different platform than Schoolnet. Okay, so they're not going to have the same names because they are not the same company. But we do have this correlation document that is also on your homepage, where I've gone through and the name of the item type on the EOG or EOC is named this, and this is what it is named in Schoolnet. Okay, so some of them are going to be the same, like drag and drop, but then there's some that are very different, like text selection is a hotspot in Schoolnet. So when you are building your formative and you're wanting to include those technology enhanced, you might want to refer to this document at first, to see what type of questions align with the others. Okay. All right. Let me close those two things out. Okay, showed you how to do that. Okay, so if you want to duplicate items in order to be able to edit them for any reason whatsoever, whether that's adding a calculator in, which I'll show you in just a second, or you just want to edit some of the text in the question, edit an answer choice, anything like that, you have the ability to do that. So I am just going to come back here and I'm going to add those questions that I had pulled to a test, just so I can show you how you can edit an item. And in just a few minutes, when I show you about the North Carolina Desmos, this is where this will come in handy with editing those questions. So here is my test that I have all of these questions on. So if I want to edit a question, going to come through here, let it load really quick. All right, so for example, this question right here, I pulled it from a bank, but let's say I wanted to change for some reason. If I wanted to change park to zoo, or if I wanted to change this number to 68, okay? Now, I, of course, can do that just by typing in the rich content editor here, but I wouldn't be able to save it. I am only editing that question for this test. So if I am editing a question because I am adding a calculator or I wanted to change one of the answer choices, then I'm going to want to make sure that I'm able to save it so that I can use that question again. Okay, so if I'm going to go through the work of adding the calculator, then I want to make sure that I save it so I don't have to do it again. Okay, so all you have to do if you want to edit a question or make a copy, at the very top, you're going to see three options right beside the number. Okay, if I click duplicate, then that's going to make a copy of this item. It's going to put it all the way at the bottom, but this is now my copy. So I can make whatever changes to it. I can come down to the additional properties and change the DOK level or add a DOK level if I want to. Like this one just had the level 2 here, but if I wanted to add a author difficulty, I can. Again, I can make any changes to this question because it's mine. I made a copy of it. It is not linked to a bank. You're not changing the original question in the bank. This is mine to do whatever I would like to with. Okay, so I'm actually going to delete this copy because your other option, if you don't want to make a copy of it, I'm going to go back to the original question, is right underneath the type of question that it is. You're going to see a text that says the item is from the item bank, okay? If you go all the way to the end, you're going to see this blue unlink button. If I click unlink, this is now my copy of the question. And again, I can make any edits that I would like to. I can change a name if I wanted it to be a student's name. I can add in my calculator, and then I will have the option of saving this question for future use. If you do not unlink it, you will not get the option to save the question. Okay, so that's going to be very important for us in just a few minutes when I show you about the calculator. Okay, so that covers how to duplicate or make a copy of a question and how to unlink it if you would like to save it and add it to a bank. Yes, so Jerry, you can add questions that you edit to a bank, and I'm going to show you how you can do that in just a moment. So I promise that we will get to that. So sorry, I just coughed in your ear. I forgot to unmute first. So one other thing that I want to show you from this, if I go back here to, I'll just click save. If I go back to my test details, okay, let's see. Want to see. You do have a few options here. If you wanted to, sometimes this has come up as a question, so just wanted to point it out. You can customize your item numbers. You can customize your answer choices, add your instructions. Let's see, I can change, if I click on this little hashtag here, I can change the order of the test. It'll start with what was at the end. That'll now be at the beginning. So just a few things that people might not realize are an option in there. Okay. All right. Let's see some special features for math and science. Okay, so first up is formula sheets. So whether you are math or science, there might be a time where you want students to be able to access some sort of resource, a formula sheet, notes that they took, and you might want them to be able to use it, but you don't want them to have like their notebook out on their desk, or you might not want them to have an additional window open, anything like that. So you can upload a resource for students to be able to use on the test. So I'm going to come back here, and if I am going like I'm going to build a test, I'm going to show you where this option is. So not there, might be in the defaults. There we go. All right, so when you are building a test, there is a section that is test item defaults. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you're going to see a formula reference sheet. Okay, so you can upload a file. Have no clue what any of these most recent screenshots are, but you get the idea of what you would be able to then upload a PDF, or if it's an image of notes or a formula, anything that you wanted them to use, you can click there and you can upload for them to be able to use. And it's going to show as a file folder for the students when they're taking the test. And I think we might actually have a image of it. excuse me, we do on slide 29. When the students are taking the test on the right-hand side, they're going to see a little file folder that says exhibits. They can click on that and it's going to show the document that you uploaded for them to be able to use. So you can only upload one resource to the test. So just know that if you wanted them to access like something that was 2 pages, you want to make sure that both pages are included in that file. But it can support up to 1 megabyte in size. Okay. All right. So another thing that we want to point out, especially for our upper sciences, like with chemistry, but then for our math as well, is that you can either edit an item, or if you are creating your own, Schoolnet does have an equation editor. So if I go back, I'm going to just go to the test I was in earlier. Oh, that's not that one that I would have to copy. Let's see if I can do one that has not been scheduled yet. No clue if there's a question on here. Let's see. That's the disadvantage of the training site. I never know exactly what is going to be in here. Okay, so this one was not for a math class. That's okay because it's still going to show exactly what I need it to. But when you are in the rich content editor, okay, there is the equation editor right here on that second row. If you kind of go down past the upload image, there's this icon right here. And if I click that, it's going to pop open the equation editor. You have a few different options of grade level. So depending on which one you need, you would just select that. There are versions of each one of these that are text plus math editor. So you would just select which one works best for your needs. So I'll just keep it on 912. And then you would have all of these drop downs of all of these symbols that I do not remember because it's been so long since I was in high school or college math. So just know that you have all of these options. Okay, so I'm going to keep it very simple and just do a mixed number, but I would be able to type that in and I could click on the boxes. I'm going to click save. And then it's going to apply that fraction or that mixed number into my rich content editor here. So again, if you are building your own items, then of course you could have this in there. Or if you edited an item and you didn't like the way the fraction was represented, if it had the division symbol or something that you just didn't like and you wanted it to actually look like the mixed number or the fraction, then you can use that equation editor in order to insert how you want that equation to look, okay? But I do want to point something out, okay? If you are, let me put this in there because I just had someone join. If you are using the equation editor, or if you are noticing that some of the items or some of the answer choices or equations that are already in the question are images, okay, and that's something else we got to talk about, and that's actually going to be the next slide. When you use the equation editor, it's essentially inserting an image. So notice when I click here, it's putting this blue box around it, okay? Same thing if I were to upload an image. I don't know if so that was the equation editor. But if your students are receiving read aloud, it only reads text. So the equation editor is essentially inserting an image, so it will not be read aloud. But you can add alt text in order for a student to receive read aloud, or if the student uses a screen reader. So that's just something to keep in mind. If your equation is entered as an image, whether you uploaded it or you use the equation editor, you are going to want to add alt text. So all you have to do is click on the equation, and right to the left of that upload image, you're going to see a little speech bubble. This is the alt text. So then you could type out 3 and 4/5 or whatever you wanted to say. You had 500 characters. It's going to let me know I need to have that dash there. So now when a student, and it's got this orange dotted line around it letting me know that it's got alt text on it. So now when a student is having this assessment, they'll get read aloud already for the text if they have that entered as an accommodation, but now this fraction will be read aloud as well. Okay, so want to make sure I point that out because I've noticed a lot of math equations are uploaded as an image, and then we'll get emails saying that the equations aren't being read aloud, and that's why, because it's not text, it's an image, and you have to have alt text for an image to be read aloud. Okay. All right. So also in here, we also have subscript and superscript. So again, I'll just go kind of like a little space over here. So you'll notice right here beside the font or the formatting options that I have an option for my subscript and superscript. But again, you could use the equation editor as well to do this, but wanted to point out that you can just use these two options if you wanted to add like an exponent or whatever to this. Okay. And these directions are all in this slide deck, okay? So that's on slide 32. Okay, moving right along. I don't see any questions in the chat. Okay, so next up is different manipulatives that we have access to. So you can add these when you are building a test. Let me get out of here, or you can always add it to an individual question if you would like. But if I go like I'm building a test, and in my defaults, you're going to see an option that says Enable Tools and Manipulatives. So if I click Yes, you'll see that we do have several rulers. We have protractor. We do have several calculator options, but I do need to point out the Desmos calculator here is the generic, basic Desmos calculator. This is not the North Carolina specific one. Not every state has their own specific Desmos. So this is the generic Desmos calculator that you can use. But if you are wanting students to have the North Carolina specific that they are going to see at the end of the year and have them practicing that throughout the year on their formatives, then I'm going to show you in just a minute how you can add that to your questions. But if you wanted a ruler or a protractor, you can insert that here. And if I go back here, I do have, let's see, oh, it's on slide 37. The students are going to see icons at the top of the screen when they are testing of whatever manipulative you chose, or a calculator if you chose that, and they would just click the icon and it'll pop up for them to then be able to manipulate on the screen. Okay. Okay, want to make sure I didn't skip anything. Okay, now let's say you don't want these items on the entire test. Okay, let's say you only want it on a specific question. Well, you can do that as well. So I'm going to cancel this test creation. And I'm going to go back to try and find my test that I was working on just a second ago. Okay, perfect. I found the right one. So let's say I only want a protractor, calculator, or ruler on just this item. So I can scroll down past the answer choices, and I have the option of selecting those manipulatives here as well. Now, please keep in mind, this would not make the test like a calculator active, calculator inactive, because the students would still be able to navigate through the questions and use a calculator. This is just going to show it on a specific question. So if only one of your 5 on your formative needed a protractor, instead of having it available for the entire test, I can just click protractor for this specific item, and it will show as an icon on the top of the screen for this question. Okay. So you do have that option as well. All right, checking my time. I know that some of you are probably thinking I'm going way too fast, and I apologize because I want to make sure that we get through all of this. All right, so next up, adding the North Carolina specific Desmos calculator. This is probably the most asked question. So I do want to point out that you do have these directions on your homepage. I'm going to show you really quick in the live site. So again, I'm going to go like I'm a teacher. And right below the webinars, you're going to see North Carolina Desmos directions. Okay, so they are always available to you, so you don't have to worry about going back in this slide deck to find that. But I'm going to use this question, even though this is a terrible question. Do not please judge that on this specific question. But if I want a North Carolina Desmos on this item, all I need to do is first, I need to open this up because I need the embed code. All right, so there are 3 different calculators, the for function, the scientific, and the graphing. Okay, so if I want the graphing, all I'm going to do is copy everything after the red text. I'm just going to copy this. And I'm going to go back to my question. Okay, right beside the spell check, you are going to see the source code editor here. So I'm going to click my source code. I'm going to hit enter, so then it'll be below any text that's already there. I'm going to hit paste, and now I have a North Carolina Desmos. Now, in case someone's already curious about this, these embed links are live. So anytime a change is made to the North Carolina version of the calculator, these embed codes automatically update. So it is not something that you will have to go back in and update later. So I know most recently a regression feature was added. So if you had edited any question before that, then it would automatically update, which is why I would point out that I would make sure that you are unlinking your items so that you can save it for later. And I'm going to show you now how to do that. Okay, so I need to add in a question from a bank because I don't know that any of these were. So ignore my clicks really quick so I can just pull an item from an item bank. And I'm going to change this to math. And it's already set to 9th grade. So I'm just going to select this item right here. Okay, so this is one that I had pulled from an item bank right below. Remember that item is from an item bank. So I'm going to click unlink. This is now mine. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to hit my source code button. And I'm going to paste that Desmos code. I'm going to make sure that that looks exactly how I want it. Okay. So now, let me let them in really quick. We're going to use our imagination that I have edited all of these questions, that my test is now ready to go. I'm ready to give it to my students. I'm going to click return to test. I'm going to save those changes. Okay. Now, something I want to point out, and please ignore that these are all orange. It is because of the standards and I'm in the training site. So yours would not be orange. They would be green, saying they are good to go. But at the end of my list, okay, there is no text right here. It is completely blank. As soon as I click finalize test, it's going to say, are you sure? Yes. I now see an option to add all items to a bank that I edited. So anything I unlinked, anything I created myself, or anything I copied, I can now add in one swoop to an item bank. So again, we're going to use our imaginations that I added a Desmos calculator to all of these. Okay, so I can now click add all items to an item bank. And I either can save it to my personal bank if I would like, or if my grade level is going to work on a bank together and we're going to add Desmos calculators to items within each standard and just work together on that, I can create a new bank and I could say ninth grade Desmos items. I can just put Desmos calculator added. I can add people to this item bank. If I want to add other teachers in my grade level, if I want to add other teachers that are in my district that we're all working on this together, I can do that. I can create my bank and save my items that I edited. So now when I go and I'm building assessments, when I select my bank, I can select my ninth grade Desmos items. I don't remember. Oh, it looks like I have two of them. So I can select this bank and I would be able to choose my questions, but I don't have my grade level and subject pulled appropriately. But it would be listed in your item bank as well. You'd be able to see, so this is one I'd previously created, my 10th grade Desmos. I have two questions. So it's going to be listed in your list of item banks. So that's where you can save all of those questions that you add a calculator to, as long as you unlink it or if you create your own. Okay. All right, and I'm going to pause real quick. Do I have any questions about the North Carolina Desmos, adding that to your test or to your items, I should say? Again, all of these steps are in the slide deck. And again, you'll have this recording as well. Okay. All right. Looks like I've got 15 minutes. Okay. So for some science resources, so of course, all of the different things that we've shown you already are in there, but did want to point out that the science department has a resource hub. I've linked it on slides 46, 47, and 48, where they are doing a lot of phenomenal work and offering a lot of support for science teachers. So outside of Schoolnet, I did want to make sure that you have all of these resources. So their science hub is on slide 46. The professional development opportunities are on slide 47. And then on slide 48 are the science supporting documents. So did want to point that out. Yes, you are getting the slides. And also you might have joined after I had added it into the chat. So let me just copy that for you and paste that there. There you go. Okay, so yes, Jerry, if you want to be able to save the item, you do have to unlink it or you have to create it yourself or duplicate it. So any of those options, you either click duplicate and that copy is yours. You click unlink and that question is now yours. And then of course, if you create your own question, then that is automatically yours. But those are the three ways for you to be able to save a question to use for future use. Yeah, you are welcome. Now, of course, you can edit an item without unlinking or copying, but you wouldn't be able to save it. And I just feel like if you are going to take the time to add that calculator in or make any other changes, then you're going to want to keep it for future use. So I would recommend being able to save that to a bank. All right, let me add person in. Okay, a few more. Ooh, I gotta speed it up. All right, so a few more things to point out. I kind of already talked about this with the key data systems with the technology enhanced items. Did want to show you what those look like. So we have an example of what Open Response has, and this one was for science specifically. You do have the option, if you are using an Open Response item, for there to be text only for a student to respond with, or you can do an equation editor. So they can actually insert like subscript, superscript, and equation needed, they can use that exact same equation editor that I showed you earlier. They would be able to use in that open response. So you do have those options as well. We also have the hotspot. This is just letting you see, whoops, didn't mean to do that. So for this one, it's telling them to click on the area that most likely represents this carrying capacity for the predator and prey populations. So the students are able to click in order to select their answer. For the task, this is a big one for science. So there are task items, which is, I believe it's called cluster maybe on the EOG. I'd have to pull up that resource document, but where there is a main passage or a main question, and then there's a part A and a part B. So we do have the ability to create those. We do have a few of those that have been given to us, I believe, from Key Data Systems. We haven't gotten any of those from DPI, but we do have the ability for you to search those from Key Data Systems, or you can create your own as well. So that is a question type in Schoolnet. So I want to make sure, because I know science, that's a big one, is those task or cluster items. Okay, inline response, it's kind of like a blank, and it gives a drop down for the student to be able to select their answer. And then graphic gap match, it looks like a drag and drop, where the items are going to be down here at the bottom, and they would drag them and drop them into the specific place. Those are called graphic gap matches in Schoolnet, and you can use text or images for those items that you want them to drag and then drop. Okay, checklist, where you can select multiple answers. And I'm not sure. Oh, I think that was the most recent numbers of the items that we have for these subject areas. And I actually think that has been updated with our latest upload. So if you give me just a second, I want to go to science specifically. Let's see. Oh, that is, okay, sorry, I'm talking to myself. All right. Let me go to the classroom bank and the life and physical science, because I know there was a request for more, I believe it was biology items. And anytime that there is a request, I mean, you are more than welcome to send me any request that you would like to see more items for a specific standard, specific subject. I pass those along. I can't guarantee that we will get those items, but it never hurts to ask. So, but I do know that I had submitted one for, I believe it was more biology items. It might have been earth science. Whoops, I didn't mean to click business. Oh, someone's coming in. Let me let them in. Okay, and let me go like I'm selecting my standards. Okay, so that was 9th, and yeah, I'm in the wrong one because that is not our current numbers. Okay, so I will update this from the live site because I don't want to take up our time with that. If those are not the current numbers, but I believe we've gotten more earth and environmental science questions. So I will update this as soon as our webinar is over, like I said, so I'm not taking up our time because I know that we only have a few more minutes. I'm not sure if we have any K2 teachers on the call, but want to point out, especially for the recording, that we don't get K2 items from DPI, but we do get K2 items from Key Data Systems. So even if you are not using them for individually for students to be able to log onto a device and take an assessment like older grades. You can still use these whole group if you would like to, but wanted to point out that these items do have some built-in features like read aloud and teacher prompts. So like teacher instructions, this one, the student would just click listen. They do not have to have read aloud tagged in their profile to receive that. So did want to point that out. There's two other things that I want to try and cover in the next 5 minutes before I just open it up for questions. And that is there is a specific test setting to consider for read aloud specifically. When you are creating your test, I want to point out, especially for science, okay, when you are putting on the accommodations for the test, just keep in mind that the text to speech option is going to read the question and the answer choice. But if there is a passage associated with your items, then you're going to want to make sure that you are selecting this box as well. The reason that it is separate is because of ELA. We know that ELA, for the most part, I don't think ever gets read aloud. But with science having passages as well, you want to make sure that you are selecting that option to enable. If not, then the student would have to read the passage themselves, and then the question and the answer choices would be read aloud with this option. So just wanted to point out to make sure you're selecting both of those. Excuse me. And we do have on the very last slide in here about student accommodations. So if you are for some reason not familiar with how students receive accommodations in their profiles, something to keep in mind. So not only does the test have to have the accommodation turned on, this is letting the system know this test needs to offer the accommodations. Whereas if it's in their profile, it's telling the system this student needs to receive it. Okay, so it has to be in both places for the student to actually see those icons for read aloud or whatever the accommodation may be. But those accommodations are entered in the student's profile in the very last tab that says Test Nav PNP. That's where it would be turned on. It does follow the student. So if it was entered at any point in their school career, then it does follow them. But I do recommend checking it once a year just because we know our IEPs and 504s, PPs, all those things are updated. So you want to make sure the student has the most up-to-date accommodations. And I know some districts have opted into read aloud for all students in certain grade levels. So you would want to make sure that text to speech, if your district is doing that accommodation, is turned on for your student as well. Okay. So wanted to point those two things out, but we are officially at the end of our session. Yes, I can definitely show you that, Jerry. So our emails are at the very last slide as well, but I am going to take these next few minutes to answer any questions that you might have.